Hello and welcome to Dialogue. China's top leadership held a high-level meeting Wednesday to assess the country's current economic situation and outline the strategic agenda for the second half of 2025. It's decided that the party is to discuss the proposals for formulating the 15th five-year plan for national economic and social development in October. So how is China navigating its economic priorities amid challenges at home and abroad? What policy tools are being deployed to stabilize growth and boost domestic demand? And what direction will the next five-year plan take as China charts its path forward? Join us for our discussion today, live from Beijing. I'm Xu Qinduo. Joining me now are Professor Jun Qian, Executive Dean of the International School of Finance at Fudan University, David Mahon, Executive Chairman of Mahon China Investment Management, and Warwick Powell, Senior Fellow at the Taihe Institute. Welcome to the show. Professor Jun Qian, I will start with you. So what's your understanding about the key message out of this latest meeting on Chinese economy?
So first of all, we've now seen the figures of the first 6 months. Obviously, it's very impressive, given that the overall growth rate is above the 5% that the government set for the whole year. Out of the main sectors, I'm personally most impressed by the fact that exporting has actually done very well, given all the uncertainties in the world about tariffs, changes in the International Trade Organization, and so forth. But at the same time, as we've seen from the release of the report of the meeting, clearly the central government is aware of the challenges ahead. And it also outlined policies, and it even mentioned that perhaps we need strengthening fiscal policies. And of course, there are a number of other policies that are needed to face the uncertainties. But overall, from the meeting and also from the release of the stats, I'm confident that we will be able to reach the goal set for the whole year, which is a top line figure is 5% growth in GDP.
So for the purpose of completing or achieving the target of around 5%, this is the goal set by the party. And David, the meeting noted, quote, more proactive fiscal policies and moderately loose monetary policies should be implemented to fully release policy effects. Here, it is very rich in its content. Obviously, it touches upon this fiscal policy, monetary policy should be implemented, proactive fiscal policy, moderately loose monetary policy. So the message is like there will be stronger fiscal and monetary policy support for economic growth for the next half?
There should be, and it has been a trend that they have been experimenting carefully, but with looser fiscal and monetary policy anyway. The other area is investment. Also, the credit culture has changed. It is now clear that the private sector is doing better in terms of access to bank loans and more support. But I think one thing which we often do at a time like this is we look at the government pronouncements, which are very important to understand what the priorities are and what the macro influences will be. But as much as China is a very centralized political and social governed country, it's not the same economically. It's actually quite a loose, interactive structure with microeconomies of provinces, cities, counties. They're all interpreting policy differently. They're all working very much for their own growth and their own balance. And interestingly, if we look at the success of the first 6 months of this year, the private sector indicators are some of the most interesting. They show real recovery, more than we possibly could have hoped for even in the first few months of this year. So the situation is quite interesting. As Professor Chen has noted, the exports do also exceed expectation. However, I think a lot of that is exporters and importers using the interludes in this whole trade war scenario to get goods into warehouses. So some of this might be in terms of people building inventory, and perhaps the export scenario won't hold in the same way through the year. I still think the growth of exports outside of the US are now clearly significant enough that we're in pretty safe territory.
Warwick, the purpose seems to be like the stress, or rather, fiscal policy, monetary policy should be implemented to fully release policy effects. So the government is looking at the desired effects of the policies, in what way probably we are going to achieve the full effects of those policies. Obviously, when the ultimate goal is economic growth, right?
Look, the ultimate goal is a combination of growth plus real wages growth, household growth, social stability, as well as economic and system resilience going forward, particularly in light of the significant external risks that not only China's economy faces, but indeed the global economy faces as a result of the capricious decision-making and the erratic decision-making of the administration in Washington. So the decisions concerning, or at least the guidance concerning fiscal stimulus and looser monetary policy is really a continuation of, as David mentioned, a series of steps taken already over the last 6 to 9 months to begin to increase system liquidity. And increasing system liquidity is the fundamental macro ingredient necessary to activate the circulation of the domestic economic system and ultimately also drive the external circulatory system as well. So this is the key thing to understand, that we have a combination of particularly fiscal interventions through very targeted measures, and more will come, as well as a growth in the rate of expansion of private credit. And over the course of the last 12 months, we've seen private credit grow by almost 9%, which is a very significant and healthy sign that enterprises are working towards and anticipating ongoing market opportunities and growing demands that need to be met.
Chen Jun, in a newly published article, Chinese Finance Minister Lau Fudan said the central government would accelerate fiscal spending, including the issuance and deployment of ultra-long-term treasury bonds and special purpose local government bonds. And this recent meeting, of course, stressed that the issuance and the use of government bonds should be accelerated to improve the efficiency of fund utilization. What does it mean when it comes to the efficiency of a fund utilization here?
So, as we know that, as both guests mentioned, the current round of stimulus actually started in September of last year. So there's already a lot of stimulus in place, but as the meeting pointed out correctly, even though at the top line growth we are exceeding the target, still there are challenges and patches around. For example, for consumption, while there is growth in the total amount, if you look at a figure like CPI in the first 6 months, virtually the CPI hasn't changed, which signals that the total aggregate demand within China is still on the recovery side. Also, the meeting mentioned that we need to keep working hard to resolve these financial risks. And two sectors that we've been talking about over the last 2 years has been real estate, local government debt. If you look at real estate, certainly places like Shanghai has done actually quite well. If you look at the new housing market and secondary housing market, we both seen clear signs of recovery. But other cities, clearly they're still in the process of bottoming out. And for local government debt, I think we're still in the process of exposing troubled projects, and those government sectors, local government sectors, are still in debt. So certainly the demand for better use of funds, right? So the total funds is out there. We certainly need more, but I certainly agree wholeheartedly with Minister Lan that we need to do a better job. For example, in terms of the housing market, we need to be more accurately target those firms and sectors and cities that need more help. And the same thing with the local government debt and local government projects. Not all troubled projects need to be salvaged. Some projects without a positive outlook in the future should perhaps be liquidated rather than be saved. And all of these two sectors being very important, needs better use of funds or higher efficiency. And then finally, for stimulating consumption, the same is also true. Because if you look at consumption by different groups, clearly there are groups that don't need any help, but clearly there are groups of people in the cities and in the countryside that need more stimulus on the fiscal side. Mm-hmm. And again, all of this require more efficient use of the funds.
Yeah, efficient use of the fund. Speak of that, of course, let's take a look at this. Some of the measures, being taken by the government, I would say, closely related to either domestic consumption or investment, and that will lead to economic expansion. David, if you look at the, right now, there is the policy is being mapped out. That is what do you call like a health, care, like child care, subsidy, basically in which families will receive. Like 3,600 yuan per year per child until the child reaches the age of 3. So that, of course, that's not only about dealing with these population challenges, but also it will help increase consumption. Is that the case?
I think it's the sum is so low that if we look at the big concentrations of urban populations and the growing middle class that make the real engine of consumption, these sums are too low. The general ecosystem within which parents bring up children, the cost of quality education, the cost of those special provisions for healthcare in an environment where they're insecure that the state will be able to provide, just floor space. You're talking to someone in Beijing. I'm in Beijing, Professor Chen's in Shanghai. Floor space, it's a huge thing to consider having an extra room in your house. And so this is a gesture. This looks like a policy. It looks like a stimulus act. And I think it's probably not taken seriously yet. But I think the government's finding its way. And rather than do some radical financial gesture towards trying to increase the birth rate, it's better they're cautious. But I don't think they're there yet in terms of really convincing, let's say, a low middle class family in Hangzhou or Wuhan to have an extra child. And in terms of general policy, there is the root system of the education system. We have a number of graduates who have been advised, guided into the wrong types of degrees. They've got good degrees, but they're struggling to find work. So there are a lot of aspects to affecting the demographics of China and motivating people. And I think if they began, I think the health system is fine. It needs to be expanded a little, to some extent. It's the education system that needs more reform. And yet we're seeing more restrictions within the education system, if anything. So I think there are a lot of aspects to this. This sum of money on its own won't make a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Well, the population is a big topic there. Well, related to that, Warwick, the government is also rolling out a latest directive to gradually implement what would be called like a free preschool education. It also touches upon the need to expand preschool infrastructure, raise the salaries and the welfare of kindergarten teachers, and improve support for children's physical and mental well-being. That is also dealing with, of course, you can call like education challenges for parents. Is also about supportive measures, to increase birth rate, and also, of course, that's about the spending.
Yeah, look, it is, and I think it is symptomatic of a turn towards a focus on boosting what I would call the foundational economy. Many observers of China have noted the tremendous developments in the high-tech arenas, in manufacturing, in telecommunications and digital systems, of course in robotics and artificial intelligence. But what we're seeing here is an initiative that focuses on aspects of social life and economic life that are really just part and parcel of what makes for a high quality standard of living in urban and semi-urban environments in particular. So this is a contribution towards the development of something that we can call the social wage and the foundational economy. It is no doubt a step forward in what is expected to be an experimental and research and analysis-driven pathway of developing these kinds of policy initiatives. China has a long-standing approach to policy design and implementation that is incredibly iterative and also open to regional variation and results-driven experimentation. So as the learnings of this first round of implementation start to come back, and particularly through the various feedback mechanisms that exist in the Chinese governance system, I think we will see over time continual fine-tuning of these policy initiatives so that they better reflect the specific requirements in each locality across such a vast country that is China.
Mm-hmm. Well, Chen Jun, if you look at the meeting, it points out that it is essential to effectively release the potential of domestic demand, deeply implement special actions to boost consumption and expand commodity consumption while incubating new growth points for service consumption. So here, special actions, are we talking about what do you call like a trade-in purchase of home allowances, that kind of special actions? So we are expecting more sanctions or?
Sure. Let me first add to the discussion on this new policy about raising a kid, which is you can also interpret that as part of the package.
Special action, yeah.
I agree that the policy is rolled out. This is just the beginning. In fact, if you read the document, it says that this is the beginning, and certainly local governments can add to the policy tool. So to that point, I want to add that I work and live in Shanghai, and we have on the one hand we have the largest population. On the other hand, the fraction of people over 60, the senior rate, is the highest in the country, and one of the highest, and rising very fast in the world. So certainly Shanghai needs this much more than a lot of other areas. And as the policy outlined, the local government, the Shanghai government, can certainly do a lot more, not only to match. So you talk about the national figure of 3,600 per year. Mm-hmm. Given the cost of living and so forth and schooling, it's easy to estimate that for Shanghai, the appropriate figure to make a difference is at least 5 to 10 times of the national average. And this is very important because I think for a large city like Shanghai, this is one of the goals they need to set during the next 5-year plan. What sort of the target population structure change? And this is very important for all the other associate sectors. Now back to consumption, I think again, as we all know, starting from late last year, boosting consumption has been regarded as both the central government and all the local governments. It's the number one task to boost economic recovery. But so again, if you look at the total consumption figure, it's growing, which is good. but certainly it's very uneven among population, among regions, and therefore we need more. You mentioned probably there needs to be more form of subsidies. Subsidize some scenario consumption, that this has been talked about, helping them. Probably we need, and then this is especially on the fiscal side, as I already mentioned, that we need fiscal support to the special groups of population, low-income families. And in the urban areas, there's also a very big group that needs a lot of help, and that's the non-resident working population. They actually have a lot of potential for consumption, but because they lack a lot of the resident rights, if you will, and that can be boosted easily, or boosted by the spending of local government and also by their employers. The consumption among this group can go up. And then finally, in the document, we keep mentioning that the overall consumption level in terms of contribution to GDP, it's still a lot of room for growth. But among consumptions, China should develop what we call the service consumption, which is it requires a higher level of training on the employees. It requires services like financial services, legal services. So it's beyond the basic consumption, and this is the area that if we put in more investment, if we strengthening the social safety net, perhaps we'll see an effect.
Yeah, well, adding to that, Warwick, there is of course the construction of what we know as the world's largest hydropower dam along the Yalongzang River. So that's about like a 1.2 trillion yuan investment for a project that will last 14 years. So that's, you can, in a sense, a stimulus also that will add to the country's security and security of energy and clean energy in a sense, right? So that, of course, some say will add to the growth of GDP, 0.1 or 0.3% there. It's also a big move there.
Yeah, look, it's actually a very important feature to understand as to the way that the Chinese economy is evolving. The basic trajectory of the Chinese economy is actually one that is shifting in a very clear direction towards greater energy sovereignty, so energy security, as well as moving up the energy efficiency curve. And I specifically mean by that what economists would call the energy return on energy invested. So that's the amount of energy that you make available for a given amount of energy that you commit to do that particular activity. And large-scale projects like hydro projects have the potential to have incredibly high energy return on energy invested rates. This is important because this is actually the foundations of raising living standards and providing the impetus that is actually needed to drive sustained household consumption growth. Let's not forget that household consumption growth can only occur when real wages are growing. So household incomes must grow, and household incomes come from increased investment. So we must take a systematic approach to understanding this question of consumption. The other feature, of course, of consumption is the question of the proportion of a household's growing income that is held in savings or spent. And what we've seen in China is actually a relatively stable rate of savings, but growing real consumption. So in this half year just gone, China has seen real retail consumption growth of over 5%. We've seen over the last few years a growing role for consumption as a driver of gross domestic product, with consumption now being over 50% of GDP growth. So the structural changes that are taking place are already in motion, and it's underpinned by strategic investments over the last 10 or 15 years in moving in this energy efficient direction, plus also the investments that have been made in educating a workforce that can actually carry out the high value roles that deliver the higher income. So China is taking a very holistic approach to tackling these interrelated challenges and also to release the potential within the economy and to enable the economic system to circulate faster and more efficiently.
Well, of course, for the next half and also for the next 5 years, we know the fourth plenary session of the 20th CPC Central Committee will be held this October, focusing on the formulating of the next 5-year or the 15th 5-year plan for the national economic and social development. So, David, what's at stake in this planning circle?
It's interesting. I think the quality of policy in the last 9-10 months is such that this won't be a meeting of surprises. It'll be a meeting of confirmation of trend. And one of the big criticisms, and it was very valid, of policy and government decision making in 2023 and last year was that it was too slow, and initiatives were not spaced. They're too spaced apart. There wasn't a kind of rhythm of good policy, connected policy. That's changed. This year's seen that issue really resolved. So we're not expecting surprises. We're expecting confirmation of a current position that I think has been discussed tonight is quite clear. The thing that's really interesting is that the one factor that everyone was afraid of, both inside China and outside China, was the impact of Washington's trade war with everybody policy. And the fact that government has been unique in its avoiding reaction. It's the Tai Chi approach of remaining vigilant, passive and ready, but not doing anything. Letting America do its deals. I mean, it's absurd that we've been told there is a deal with Europe when Ursula von der Leyen essentially verbally agreed to something with Donald Trump. There's nothing in writing. And she's got to go back to her members of the EU and get every state's approval. There are no deals out there. All these things are just bragging and moments for television. So China's watching this through a period when we would have expected by now some very punitive issues in terms of China's supplies, imports, critical imports, a lot of tariffs on Chinese goods, and it really hasn't happened in the way that people feared. So I'm also seeing that by the time we get to October, it'll be even clearer that there's a certainty in the Chinese government, and there is a understanding of the leverage it needs so America can't be ridiculous in respect of it on policy. That's going to make an impact across the country on public confidence and consumer confidence. So there's a number of linked things here, which I'm actually very confident that by the time we get to October, we will be seeing a lot of things coming together. So it'll be a confluence of known forces.
On that note, we are coming to the end of today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app or on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.